Lahore's most famous landmark and a major tourist attraction.
Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Yesterday in our program, we did say that the next 24 hours are really important. And exactly within those 24 to 48 hours, what we have witnessed is that there is a very, very strong reply from the Iranian side, and they targeted three air bases inside Iraq. One was the air base from which they believe that particular drone took off, which killed the Iranian general. Now it is believed that around 17 scuds were fired. These were the ballistic missiles. 12 of them were fired at Al-Asad air base, and 5 of them were fired on the other. But now the interesting part is that the Iranian authorities, they believe and they claim that they've been able to kill 80 American terrorists. Now the interesting part is that they've used the word terrorist, 80 American terrorists, whereas according to the American president, Mr. Donald Trump, he says all is well. He says there's no casualty, nothing at all. But obviously when we talk about the detail, that is something we all are worried about. If this escalates, the entire region is going to get engulfed. The most important part is that in a little while, the President of the United States of America, Mr. Donald Trump, is going to address the nation, and most likely this man is going to declare a full-fledged war against Iran. Now, what is going to happen after that? That is what is primarily going to be the topic of a discussion. But before we start, we'll show you a report. After the report, we'll get you introduced to our panelists, and then we'll start our debate. Let's watch this report.
More than a dozen Iranian missiles have targeted 2 military bases in Iraq that housed American troops in retaliation for the US killing Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani. Iranian Supreme Leader Khamenei termed the missile attacks as a slap on the US's face. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani also addressed the nation after the attacks and said that the US may have cut off Soleimani's arm, but Iran will respond by cutting off your leg in the region. President Donald Trump tweeted after the Iranian missile attacks that all is well. Assessment of casualties and damages taking place now. We have the most powerful and well-equipped military anywhere in the world. I will be making a statement tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, a number of international airlines have announced that flights will be avoiding the airspace over Iran and Iraq after reports of strikes on bases housing American troops in Iraq. On the other hand, after the news of the attack, the international oil benchmark soared above US $70 a barrel, nearly 4% rise from Tuesday. In the background of the situation being developed in the Middle East, Foreign Minister Hamid Qureshi has stated that the region cannot afford war. It is not in anyone's interest, and it will impact the global economy.
Well, the region cannot afford war. By the way, any region cannot afford war. Unfortunately, Middle East is in a state of war for a very long time. Whether you talk about this so-called the Arab Spring of 2011, or you talk about the invasion of Iraq, or you talk about so many other areas where the involvement of the United States of America has been a disaster. Now, let me read out a tweet of our Prime Minister, Mr. Imran Khan. And he has said that I have asked the Foreign Minister, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, to visit Iran, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and United States of America to meet with respective foreign ministers, Secretary of State and the Chief of Army Staff, General Bajwa, has been told to contact relevant military leaders to convey a clear message. Pakistan is ready to play its role for peace, but it can never again be a part of any war. Now, last is very important. This is what Pakistan has been trying to emphasize on. that we will never be a part of any war. We will not become a party. This is what the Prime Minister cleared. And if you remember 2 days ago, the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, also emphasized on the fact that we cannot be a part. But can we be neutral once so much is expected? We border Iran, and what if again the airspace is required by the Americans, or for that matter, if they want to use the ground of Pakistan? In that case, the DGISPR has very categorically mentioned that Pakistani space or Pakistani land will not be used against any country. And in particular, when you talk about Iran, that's a neighbor, a Muslim brotherly country. So primarily, things are really tense there. Situation is very fluid. To talk about this, we have with us in our studio. Let me introduce you to our panelist. On my right is Ambassador Saeed Khalid Saab. Saeed Khalid Saab is a senior diplomat, sir. Thank you very much for taking out your time and being here. We also have with us Air Vice Marshal retired Ikramullah Bhatti Saab. He's a very senior and seasoned analyst, sir. Thank you very much. And we have with us Dr. Professor Rifat Hussain Saab. Again, needs no introduction. He's a senior analyst and IR expert. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Now, sir, when the Iranians say that they have targeted a certain area and this is our revenge and this is a slap from Iran on the face of the Americans. And again, they have not said that so many people were killed. They believe that 80 American terrorists have been killed in that particular attack. Whereas we all know Trump said that all is well. Is all well, sir, or something has happened there?
I think nobody is surprised. We should not be surprised that Iran has launched an attack. They had vowed to do that, and they had told their people that they will hit back. And
was the regime under the public pressure, sir, or they really wanted to take revenge?
You know, it works both ways. You generate an opinion and then you act on that opinion. So it's two-way traffic. But the important thing is that they have acted. Important question is whether they will do something more and whether the US will do something more. And I think this is where the messaging part comes in.
Sir.
For a country like Pakistan, there may be other countries. There is the European Union. I can't right now think of other countries, but there must be other international players who are following this very closely.
Most of the European countries, they have condemned this particular action undertaken by the Iranians.
So what is the objective right now? I feel the American objective is that it should not flare up further. Iranian objective is to salvage their honor, their credibility. And I think if both sides, they can meet their objectives, not fully, but even halfway, that will be a good situation.
Do you think the restraint can be exercised even at this stage, sir?
Absolutely.
It can be?
This is the stage when restraint is needed.
So you believe that if some dialogue process starts, things can really diffuse?
Well, I won't call it a dialogue, but like, you know, you think or you hear of war drums. Similarly, you hear of peace vibes. So these are peace vibes which are being sent from different directions to different players. And you know, logic, reason and logic, they tell us that they should not escalate.
I hope so. AVM Saab, are you hearing the wall drums?
Well, as you said that the US President is going to make a speech to the American nation and of course give out his plan of action from here on. But the fact remains that the Americans have been trying for quite a while for a regime change in Iran. And I think this could be yet another step by them or an action by them to achieve that. But the situation is different what it used to be a couple of years ago or in the previous conflicts in the Middle East, because several allies of the US have expressed their unwillingness
to be a part of the
to
war.
be part of this. The Germans, the Australians, the Italians have already ordered their troops out of Iraq. And even the EU has given a very cautious statement.
They're very worried about the presence of their soldiers, sir, also the allies.
And
Croatians have pulled out.
also this action or this decision by the American president is being looked at as a step to salvage his impeachment process, or of course as a move to gain prominence or support for the next elections. With all this, it appears that it may not go further from here on, because this is presently a lull where peace process can step in and hold the situation right here. And of course, in this, the major world players, be it Russia, China, EU, and the regional countries, they can play a very decisive role in convincing the Americans not to go any further, because of course the prestige, the honor of the Iranians had been hurt, and now that they have, as they say, given a slap on the American face, killed 80 terrorists, so I guess it should be adequate for them to feel relieved, having avenged this action of the Americans. Well, the American president can say that all is well. Maybe the American troops were in the underground bunkers, not many casualties have occurred, but I'm sure with so many missiles landing at such a confined space, confined ground, would certainly have caused substantial damage.
To the assets?
To the infrastructure, to the assets, and even lives, because all of them may not be in bunkers. Now the ball is in Americans' court. Whether they want to retaliate from here on and take it up to a full-fledged war, or stop it right here. And it is a decision by Mr. Donald Trump, whether will he stop here or he goes further. Of course, he'll have a political cost. There'll be a political price of whatever decision he takes. He wants to go to war or he wants to stop right here. And of course, he can create...
Iranians have vowed that they will make sure that the American troops should not only go out of Iraq, but the region they are talking about, sir. Well, now when you look at the American interest, and they've spent trillions and trillions of dollars, sir. And one more important question, that is regarding Saudi Arabia, because it seems that whenever there is a potential threat from Iran, whether it's a perception or it's a reality, that's a separate debate altogether. The Saudis are always willing to buy weapons from the Americans. So if you remember that $480 billion deal, that's not a joke. I mean, whatever they are giving, that's a separate chapter again. But sir, that's a cash cow. Saudi Arabia is a cash cow for the Americans. Do you think they would prefer that cash cow to be dry, sir, just because they want to diffuse tension with the Iranian if they attack them and make sure that they won't be able to rise again for the next 30, 40 years? Do exactly what they have done in Iraq, sir.
Well, you see, that has a lot of cost, to the region and to the world. And the world today is not prepared as it was in the earlier two Gulf wars to support such an activity. So the Americans will have to think a couple of times if they want to go that way. In the absence of any
Maybe
support.
they won't mind just using the top of the line technology, Dr. Saab, rather than putting the boots on ground.
You see,
because they don't want to occupy. Most likely either they'll go after their leadership.
You see, even if they do that, which probably would be their preferred choice.
Exactly.
The fact remains that when the Iranians start to use their ballistic forces, they are going to create havoc in the region.
They have threatened that they can go after Israel.
Yes.
They can go after Bagram Air Force Base, sir,
yes,
which is housing how many? 12,000 troops are still in Afghanistan. I think that's the highest number in the entire region, sir.
True.
So yeah, things are very, very fragile, very fluid.
So it is going to incur a very heavy cost, not just for the Americans but for the region and the world.
And
of course, the world today is not as prepared, as supportive as it was earlier.
Because they've seen the results.
Yes.
They've understood the philosophy of the Americans
So,
also.
so at this stage,
Times
I
have
think
changed.
this is now the time for the Americans and the American president to take a very, very rational decision.
Rationality. What an interesting word you have tried to associate it with the American leadership. Sir, rationality and Donald Trump.
No,
Do they go together, sir?
no, we may have a totally naive view of Trump by considering him a totally irrational man, stupid man, who launched, who not only ordered the killing of the Iranian military general Qasem Soleimani Saab, but we have to read it in the context of the larger American design.
Absolutely.
What is the larger American objective? If the larger American objective is to embroil Iran and its allies, which means proxies of Iran, in a larger conflict which will lead to a situation where they can threaten the regime. If that is the larger objective, then I think this escalation, one-step escalation that we are talking about, the killing of the Iranian general and the Iranian response will not stop at that. So that's my, so, and we will soon find out what the Americans are trying to do. But the very fact that they postponed the briefing, they postponed the American president's address to the nation, which is going to be done in about a couple of hours' time, does mean that the Iranian missile strike against the two bases in Baghdad, in Iraq, had a very substantial impact. And the Americans are, one reason why they are...
Sir, was it a surprise for the Americans?
No, no.
Were they expecting
no,
it?
No, because you would realize that before the Iranians retaliated, they had taken the Iranian parliament and the Iranian prime minister into confidence that we are going to launch an attack. So which essentially means that
they were told.
They were told about it because they didn't want to be
Today
seen.
the speaker of their assembly condemned the attack, but yes,
so
they were told.
Which in my judgment means that the Iranians have acted proportionately as was promised by Javed Zarif in his press conference, and he has said that we have taken the retaliatory strike and we have concluded this. So which does indicate that the Iranians have no intentions to go any further than what they have already done.
So that means, Dr. Saab, that now the overall course of action that the Americans will adopt, that will determine the future of the area.
That will determine the future of the area, and that will depend on what the American larger design is. Is it trying to punish Iran more by launching a counter-attack and a maybe massive retaliation, or the Americans
some calculated hits,
or some calculated damage, because by launching a drone strike against General Soleimani, the Americans have sent a very clear signal to the Iranian leadership that decapitation strike is going to be the future of the American attacks and the American strike against any other target. It's not only the Iranian targets, and the question is that are the Americans going to stop at that? And that I think will be determined by what we call the battle damage assessment of the Iranian counter strike against the Americans. And if there have been American casualties, then
most likely is going to go after them.
Then President Trump will be in a fix, because he has already threatened that in case there are any soldiers or even the American civilians are taken hostage, so we will take revenge. So there is a verbal commitment trap that President Trump has created for himself. But the question is that will the UN Security Council step in at this point in time, which I think in my judgment is imperative, because the Secretary General would see, having called for restraint, but of course the Iranians were well within their right to strike, because
yes, according to Article 51 of their constitution, we have done it.
So which means that the lot will depend on what the the American response is going to be to the Iranian retaliation, and that will determine the situation, and we will find out in a couple of hours' time.
In a couple of hours' time. I mean, the next couple of hours are really, really important. Now, Saeed sir, we all feared this, and this is happening, unfortunately. A lot of analysts do believe that, as Dr. Saab also mentioned about the larger game plan of the Americans, sir, Iran is a big country, and Iran is not Iraq. Iran is not a small country, and as far as their proxies are concerned, because that is the strength. And I think Iranians they have mastered the art of proxy war, sir, asymmetrical warfare. Whether you talk about Syria, sir, and they have been able to engage the Americans there.
They have been at it for the last 10 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then you talk about Lebanon, for that matter, sir. They have a lot of presence there. You talk about Iraq, and after this particular strike in which the Iranian general was killed, sir, I think we see a lot of unification between the two countries also. Shia element is there as well, sir. That revenge, once they hoisted that red flag, we all knew that they'll go and they'll do something, and they've done it. Now, sir, in this scenario, it seems that it is not only going to be limited to Iran, sir. There is a very high probability that in the wake of this, the Indians might go for some sort of a false flag operation, sir, or maybe some sort of a misadventure in Gilgit-Baltistan or in Kashmir, sir. Because when the whole region is disturbed, then you can take advantage.
There are a couple of things
Sir.
to be looked at. First of all, the world's sole superpower, which spends more than half of its federal budget on defense, could not stop the missiles launched by Iran. What does that say about their anti-missile defenses?
Now the question is whether that system was deployed there or not.
This question has to come up.
That Iron Dome, which the Israelis have, to look after their own country.
But I mean, an American, you know, an ordinary American, he will say they are spending more than half of the federal budget on defense.
Over 800 billion last year, sir.
And they cannot stop Iran missiles. So we are very vulnerable. We are very vulnerable to Iranian attacks. Iran can hit us hard in many places. They can hit our ships in the Gulf. They can hit so many targets. So it shows, if all this is true, it shows a certain vulnerability on America's part, and that should have a say in their further decisions and their further claims and their further pronouncements. That is the first thing. Secondly, what are the Americans trying to convey? You know, we have short memories. We forget that when Mullah Mansoor went to Iran and he was returning to Pakistan,
Mullah Mansoor Akhtar, yes.
He was shot down.
Yeah.
And then
he was droned.
He was droned. And then after some time, they engaged the Taliban in talks. The talks have been going on. So there is you know, it's not static, the whole thing, it's dynamic. What is America trying to convey now? That people like Mansoor and people like Soleimani, they cannot roam around freely. We can get them if we want.
We can hit you whenever,
wherever
we want.
If you are traveling from here to there, we will kill you. As simple as that. Mullah Omar never was seen. He didn't travel. So he survived.
Never had a picture also.
Anybody. So if characters like these, who are playing very important roles against America, America is sending a signal it's no more possible. So if Soleimani's successor, he tries to do this, he'll have to think twice whether he can travel like his predecessor was doing. Second message is that to Iran, just the operations you mentioned, Iran has been conducting. In Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, which makes the Gulf countries, their rulers, very, very nervous. That Iran is like an arc spreading around them. So that is the second message, that Iran should reconsider its operations beyond its borders. You asked if India can do something? I don't see any connection really, because America killed an Iranian on Iraqi soil. It's a very different operation. India will, whatever India does, it will have to do it directly vis-a-vis Pakistan, whether it's a false flag operation or it's a so-called strike against Pakistan. So that the situation is not the same.
Now, sir, I hope it doesn't happen again, sir, but when you look at the...
Professor,
so you want to add something?
No, just for 15 seconds.
Please, sir.
With due respect, there is no comparison between Mullah Mansoor's murder and the murder of or the assassination of General Qasim, because he was a state official, and under international law you cannot target state officials.
Now he was on a state visit also, sir.
And the Pompeo said that he was not on a peace mission. The fact is that
he was.
I have read a couple of stories which indicated that he was on a peace mission to bring the differences between Iran and Saudi Arabia down. So there is no comparison between Mullah Mansoor and General Qasim.
I'm not comparing. I'm just saying that the US has sent a signal to the world that it will kill its enemies, whether they are in air or they are on ground, whether they are official or they are head of Taliban.
The question is then, where is it going to lead now? Nobody knows.
It's not a question of any comparison. It's not a comparison.
For example, in today's speech, when the American President Donald Trump is going to announce, because whatever has happened before, sir, I just going to give you one example. And it's worrisome because he thinks in a very different way, sir. He was telling somebody, I'm not exactly sure which leader was that, that I was having some sort of a chocolate dessert or something. And during that conversation, when he was really appreciating the taste of that dessert, sir, he said, well, meanwhile, the Americans are also bombing some country. And he said Iraq. Syria. It wasn't Iraq, it was Syria. Yes. But he couldn't even tell that which country was it. And around 112 missiles were fired, sir. So this is the kind he thinks as if it's a video game. It's not, sir. This man is a dangerous man. I mean, no matter whether we say that, he's going to look after the economic affairs, yes, maybe. But when it comes to this, so many people are not ready to work with him. So that means it's a very hard cookie. What if he decides something otherwise?
Well, if he has to take an extreme decision, I'm sure the advisor from Pentagon would have a say in it. And while in another program we were discussing yesterday that his decision to make this attack against General Soleimani must not have been his own. It must have been presented to him in a set of options in which he picked this one. And I expect the Pentagon staff to have briefed him the consequences or possible repercussion of each and every option.
Correct.
And if those advisors did not brief him that Iranians are expected to retaliate, that means they failed in the job, because they would have known this, they should have known this. And if they had known this, I'm sure they would have prepared all their bases and American troops and their establishments in Iraq and around so that they are prepared to withstand any such onslaught of ballistic missiles, because that would have been the first choice of weapon for the Iranians. So when the American president sits down later this evening and make that speech, I'm sure he should have and he would have consulted the Pentagon staff, and they would have looked at all possible options and their repercussions, including the political cost of whatever decision that he takes. And of course, he will have his own mind in it as well, and because the ultimate decision is going to be his own. But whatever decision that he makes, I think Pentagon would have had a contribution to it.
It can't be done without them.
It cannot be absolutely independent decision of Mr. Trump. So we can just hope and expect that it's a rational decision in the interest of, not in the region, but in the interest of the world. Otherwise, we know how this is going to snowball, how it is going to involve not just the region, but
it's an never-ending story.
Entire world. So we can just hope that the Pentagon planners have thought of everything and they have briefed their president well.
Maybe whoever thinks, but the point is that at the end of the day, today I was listening to Nancy Pelosi, and everybody seriously want that the first thing the Americans should exercise is constraint. Because once you would fire, then the bullet is not going to come back, sir.
Certainly.
So not to get to that point, but sir, at the same time, looking at the Dr. Saab, overall economic situation, within one day, look at the jump in the oil prices, more than 5%. On the day of the killing, it went again around.
Yeah.
And a lot of analysts and a lot of economists, they believe that if something happens in the region, and for example, if the Iranians just put some mines in the sea, sir, this is going to be a real problem. Not only, not in particular for the Americans because they believe in the shale gas and the shale oil and all those, but countries like China, Japan, maybe Australia, India, Far Eastern countries, and European countries in particular. And that means a disaster if the oil prices go around $150 a barrel. And another option which the Iranians have is they believe that if something happens to our oil facilities, then the whole Middle East will be burning. These cuts won't be thrown on the bases, most likely on the top Saudi or UAE facilities. You never know, sir. And we have witnessed this in the 90s also.
Yeah, Faisal, there are two things about it. According to my assessment, I could be wrong. Americans have a plan how to come to terms with what they call Iranian expansionism in the region, which means Iran's use of proxy wars. So by killing General Soleimani, they have sent out a message to all of the Iranian proxies or Iranian allies in the region that they are not safe. They are not immune to American punishment. That's one. The other thing is that Mike Pompeo and day before yesterday, President Trump himself said that with our being in Washington White House, we would never let Iran acquire nuclear weapons. So which means that the next American possible target of retaliation could be the Bushehr facility in Iran and a couple of others. And I have read news that both the Chinese and the Russians have deployed significant anti-missile
in Iran.
In Iran in defense of Bushehr. So which means that there is a real danger that a small escalation can lead to a larger conflagration whose consequences would be disastrous for the entire region, and the Iranian retaliation by using their missiles has sent also a signal to the American allies, Saudi Arabia and Kuwaitis and all other
countries primarily.
So which means and if you look at earlier you were asking Akram Saab about the Trump's handling of the crisis. You would recall that in case of North Korea,
sir,
he said that I have a bigger thumb and I have a bigger
the button's right next to my bed.
But then he escalated and then he de-escalated. So there is a good chance that America will swallow whatever damage has been done as a result of the Iranian strike and may offer, I'm not saying that he will, but he may offer, he has the opportunity to offer an olive branch to the Iranians that let's call it a day and let's not escalate. which means that, the larger American design, how do you encircle Iran, will be thrown out of gear. So we have to watch it very carefully.
It could go either way.
Yeah.
Future of JCPOA, sir.
Well,
in this case?
Iranians have, I think they have used a master stroke of diplomacy to get out of the constraints which were imposed on the
they have said we'll build. Yeah.
Arrangement. So that has been the first casualty.
Correct.
And that has got the European countries more worried as compared to what Trump and doing to Iran and Iran's retaliatory posture.
Now, sir, we do believe that the Trump administration, even prior to that, Obama administration, they all believe that at some stage, if things do settle down in Afghanistan or in Iraq for that matter, so we will withdraw our forces. But now looking at the designs of the Americans, they really want to place a certain number of their forces or technology for that matter, or the power to hit any country from that in the form of drones maybe. They have kept them there. We talk about around 14,000 troops are still stationed in Afghanistan, and then you talk about 8,000, 7,000, 6,000 in different countries, whether you talk about Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, primarily, and the kind of SS they have in the Gulf region, sir. You can't rule out that. The American firepower, I think, on one side and the rest of the world on one side. I mean, still they have more. In such a scenario, sir, the situation around Pakistan, we have been facing the music, sir, ever since the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. It's been almost 40, 41 years. Unfortunately, we have a very aggressive enemy and a neighbor in the form of India. The only border, which was a porous border, is still a porous border, sir. And we have had few issues there as well with the Iranian government. Do you think, sir, if that border isn't safe anymore, obviously in the form, for example, if something happens, we could end up having refugees coming in from that side, or maybe something else. In such a scenario, sir, the role of Pakistan, now the Prime Minister, we just read out that tweet in which he has asked the Foreign Minister to go and visit Iran, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as well as USA. And on the best of the Americans, if you remember, we tried to diffuse the situation between Saudi Arabia and Iran also. Where exactly that statement stands or that agreement stands, nothing happened on that, but at least there was an effort made by Pakistan. In this case, sir, do you think Pakistan will be able to play any sort of a role? Can we ask the Americans to sort of exercise constraint?
Faisal, first of all, this situation is in a flux. It is not yet settling down. One cannot predict. One cannot forecast what is going to happen. And the other thing is...
So the point is that when we pick up the newspaper and we read that mother of all bombs was thrown in Afghanistan close to our border, killing so many XY number of people, sir. This man has the capacity to do anything and everything. That's what I'm saying.
Well, let's not forget that...
he is not Abraham Lincoln.
That we have seen
three
American presidents in recent memory. Bush was there for 8 years.
Yes.
Obama for 8 years.
Correct.
And now this is Trump's 4th year starting. Now each one of them comes with his outlook, with his worldview, with his ideas, and they start airing those ideas. Obama said Iraq was an unjust war.
Yes.
Iran was a just war. He tried, he huffed and hawed and tried in Iraq, and he tried in Afghanistan, left after 8 years. Not great progress achieved.
He talked about Kashmir, if you remember.
Yes.
He talked about Guantanamo Bay. So many other commitments he made.
This fellow, who is a fixer, who is a hustler, who is a wheeler dealer, who has no experience of being in government at all, who has hustled all his life, evaded taxes and been proud of that I'm very smart, I avoid taxes. He suddenly reaches the White House. He has the button next to his table or his bed, wherever. And he comes up with fantastic ideas and fantastic claims and exaggerations and all that. This speech, which is supposed to come, it will show whether he has learnt anything in 3 years or not, or he is still, Dr. Saab would know, Vice Marshal Saab would know, or whether he's still
has he
in the
learned
same
anything in
spot.
the last 3.5, 4 years?
He's still there.
Is he a trigger-happy person?
Well, you see, as Dr. also just mentioned a little while ago, that there are occasions where he has shown restraint, where he has shown
You mentioned
caution,
about the North Korean issue.
where he's shown wisdom. And so it's not beyond him. It is well within its reach if he chooses to exercise it. That is the $1 million question.
Will he be under some sort of a compulsion or pressure by the American decision makers, sir?
Well, he has to win the next election.
Certainly, you see, there is a cost that is written on the wall. If he bites this, swallows this Iranian retaliation.
Is it going to go against him? Because he is going to evaluate each and everything.
Certainly, but
in particular this about his next 4 years.
He's going to negotiate it. He's going to get something in return, that he's been able to tame the Iranians in their regional ambitions, in their managing, using the proxies, something. And he's going to maybe ask Putin or China or Turkey or Saudi Arabia or Pakistan to intervene and come out with a via media which is acceptable to the Iranian, which is acceptable to his voters, so that he comes out standing and hopeful for the next election. So I think he's going to keep all this in view and then take a decision as to what is going to be his next step. But the fact remains that I don't think he is in a position to take any extreme decision, because the world, as you said, is now different. People have now seen through this. His allies are no longer supporting him.
If you remember, there was this resolution in United Nations, and after that, if I'm not wrong, Nikki Haley resigned. Correct, sir?
Yeah.
The resolution was about an attack on Iran.
Yeah.
The whole world condemned it, except for 8 countries and USA, and those countries include Haiti and countries like that.
Yes.
So this is the general perception. Do you think that has changed after this, sir? Or if there are any casualties in this particular attack of last night, things could go different?
No, you see, if he has to swallow, he will swallow all that. I mean, there have been 2,400 casualties or more in Afghanistan, yet at the end of the day, he is negotiating a withdrawal from there. So, I think there is going to be a lot of pressure from his own people, from his allies, from the world situation.
Well, the art is how he handles that.
Yes.
And shouldn't get carried away or shouldn't get persuaded by that pressure. So last minute and your comment on this very important call which the Chief of Army Staff received, not from Mr. Mike Pompeo, sir, but the Defense Secretary, Dr. Asper. And what he said that he believes that we don't want to seek any conflict, but will respond forcefully if necessary. Has that time come, sir, to sort of put two calls around that if necessary? Is it necessary now, sir?
Well, I think the message is not directed towards Islamabad, the message is directed towards Tehran. By making this statement, he has made America's intention clear. Of course, Secretary of Defense are not supposed to be very apologetic about what they are doing, but there has been a pushback.
The most hawkish person is always placed.
Yeah, but there has been a pushback from the Pentagon officials also. They are saying, for example,
52 sites issue, sir.
52 sites issue, and also the inclusion of the cultural
and religious.
Cultural and religious side, because people reminded Bush, Trump that under the Hague Convention,
you can't do that.
Any threat which is held out against the cultural and the religious side is a crime under international law. So please,
sir, if you remember, there was this attack by the Americans in a hospital. It was Kunduz, if you remember, a C-130. In fact, they were firing from that and they were launching out. A lot of people got killed, and I remember the doctors from the what do you call that, sir? Borders.
Doctors Without Borders.
Doctors Without Borders. They were there. They in fact made videos from their phones and everything. So many people got killed, sir. And the Americans, in fact, initially they said sorry, and later on they said no. The Taliban were hiding. So what if they say that somebody is hiding?
No. There is a critical difference. America is not in a state of war with Iran. We have to understand this.
What if they disclose it tonight,
No,
sir?
no, no. But you know, that will be an act which the American president has to declare a war against Iran, and for that he would need congressional authorization.
Well, sir, I believe that sanity should prevail at all costs, sir. Doctor, sir, thank you very much. AVM Sahib, was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Ambassador Sahib. That's all we have for this hour. Inshallah, I'll see you tomorrow at 8. Let's hope what sort of statement comes out from the American President Donald Trump. But at the end of the day, as I earlier mentioned, that sanity should prevail. Thank you very much.